My name is Will Davies. I'm a professor of political economy at Goldsmiths University of London. Welcome to my exp. Our idea of economic growth derives from a particular view of the world that privileges markets as being a basis on which to distribute goods and to decide on what's valuable. And in a market, the extent to which something is valued depends on how much someone is prepared to pay for it. So roughly, although we know that there are certain things that are far more valuable than anything that you can buy in a market, such as friendship, family, the sort of experience of nature and all sorts of other things. The way that GDP, gross domestic product, is calculated is as an aggregate of all of the different prices for things that are paid for in a particular national economy. That means that there are various absurdities that have developed within the calculation of GDP that many environmental economists and feminists and other critics of GDP have pointed out. There's a famous speech by Robert Kennedy criticizing gross domestic product, saying that it doesn't capture anything that makes life worth living. And this was in the mid-1960s. So it's not a new complaint that GDP is a bad indicator of what society is really for or what human beings deem most valuable. But it's very difficult to come up with an alternative. Over the years, green economists and others have developed what are called social indicators. These are attempts to try and quantify different aspects of socio-economic activity, or to focus on things like well-being, understood either in a psychological sense or in a more sociological sense, so as to try and come up with a different way of measuring the value of different activities, which doesn't always resort back to market prices in the way that gross domestic product does. So there are alternatives, and those alternatives have been around actually for quite a long time. One of the difficulties with those alternatives, and some of them have had some quite useful benefits, particularly in areas such as development policy, and already many statistics offices around the world now do collect official data and publish indicators about things like happiness and well-being and so on. But the question is, to what extent can they actually displace GDP now that it's such a powerful indicator? Because so much of our assumptions about politics, the idea of a recession is something that is defined in terms of two successive quarters of negative GDP growth. That's what defines a recession. So our entire public sphere, our politics, the business pages of the newspapers are now so focused upon this GDP indicator that it's quite difficult to imagine how that gets sidelined. But I think it's very important that we do find ways of thinking beyond GDP, not least because I think, as environmental economists have argued since the 1970s, the idea that it's possible to carry on having indefinite levels of economic growth in a planet of finite resources is becoming more and more obviously untenable. There's been quite a long history of interest in the idea of well-being as something that could potentially become an object of economics and statistics as an alternative to focusing on market prices. I mean, the science of economics, as we can currently understand it, which was born in its current form in the late 19th century, has always used prices as the main source of data, that it is a science of price formation with various underlying assumptions about human psychology, many of which are not remotely plausible. So the idea that people will always rationally take the most utility maximizing option, which is something that was believed by some economists in the late 19th and early 20th century. And most people know that that's not how we behave mostly in our everyday lives. So the question is, how would economics and statistics be refashioned in ways that didn't apply this emphasis and make these assumptions that price is the best indicator of value and that rational choice is the best assumption about how humans behave?